fight her.
Oh, big right hand! One punch! That is it! Forget about the count. It is over!
Heather the Heat Hardy.
Golden Gloves champion back in 2012.
Heather was landing some really vicious shots. He worked overhand rights. Shelly Vincent
defeated as a pro, and then Alice Yager trying to go toe-to-toe and fight fire with fire, but as she did that, she ate. And then this right hand put her on the butt, and that was the beginning.
Even when Nadia backs her up, she's the one, the temperament of the fight.
Heather the Heat Hardy.
Hi, I'm Susie from Women's Fight News, and I'm here today with American boxer Heather the Heat Hardy, who is former WBO featherweight champion. And it's really good to see you here today, Heather. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to just start off with, really, what got you into boxing in the first place?
It's quite a long story, but I was going through a divorce, living with my sister. I was working a lot of jobs. She was like the dad, I was the mom. I'm other way around. She was like the mom, I was like the dad, working a lot. And a little karate school opened up in my neighborhood, so she got me a gift certificate. I joined up. I took these little kickboxing classes. They offered me a fight within 3 weeks, and I took it and I won. And I was 28. It was the first time I ever felt like I was good at anything. So I just didn't stop.
And then you got involved with Geason's. Is that right?
Yeah, I got to a point in kickboxing where I pretty much fought everybody. Like, it's such a small sport here in New York, and I fought everybody. And I just thought, like, I know I'm not good enough. You know, I know I'm not great yet. I know I have so much to learn. Where am I going to go? And if you're from Brooklyn, New York, you know to go to Geason. So.
And then you went and had your amateur career. How was your amateur career?
So in 18 months, I won every title you could win as an amateur. At 125 pounds, I won regionals, metros, nationals, golden gloves, and a whole bunch of other local stuff. And, you know, I was turning 30, and I just thought, well, you know, I won all this stuff as an amateur. I tried out for the Olympic team, but with the little experience I had, I moved up to 132 and got knocked out in the semifinals. And I just thought, well, let's see what I can do as a pro.
That was 2012. You turned pro.
Yeah.
And with your whole career, I mean, you've been quite, you've been breaking barriers, haven't you, during your career? So, like,
well, my career started before women were, like I said, like, it was the first year that girls are going to be allowed in the Olympics in 2012. So while the girls were making noise internationally for the first time, I was kind of, like you said, breaking ground in New York City, doing things as a professional for the first time. So it was kind of fun to see where it's evolved since then and how much little support we had back in 2012, 13, 14.
You were like your first female to be on like national TV in like 20 years and things like that.
Yeah, I fought on an Errol Spence undercard, and me and Shelly Vincent in 2016, we sold out the amphitheater in Coney Island. And for Errol Spence, he was still on the come up, you know, like I think he made like 300 grand for the fight or something. It was still like being tested. So of course they wanted us to sell out the venue, and we were going to be the co-main event. And Errol's fight was going to be on NBC and ours was on NBC Sports. And the promoters came in and they were like, we're actually going to do this thing where we're going to put the co-main event on after the main event. So me and Shelly were kind of like, why? And they didn't want all of the fans to leave the stadium after mine and Shelly's fight. And we just thought it was quite ironic that they wouldn't call us the main event, right? They wouldn't call us the main event. And we each made about 20 grand for the fight. We were on NBC Sports. I mean, it was quite a sight. And that was just like one of the many things that proves the disparity in women's boxing and where we were.
Touching on that, because obviously there's been a lot said on social media recently in terms of women's pay. Because obviously, like you said, you've seen things change right from when you started to now, and obviously the last year things have picked up a little bit in the UK. But obviously you've got a lot to say around women's pay and how it is at the moment.
Well, I have a lot to say based on my own personal experience, right? Like, I've fought for world titles at $20,000 and had women in my gym who were boxing in the late 2010, 2008, 2009, who would travel internationally and maybe make $3,500 for a world title fight. So to them, I was making decent money. And I think that that's the narrative that has to change. That's, I'm 22-1 as a professional boxer. My only loss coming to perhaps one of the greatest that's ever laced them up, right? Like, it's not like I lost against someone I shouldn't have, but I'm worth a lot more than $20,000 for a world title fight. And in April, I was offered a fight with Terry Harper, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Come up to 130. I always have trouble making weight at 126, and they offered me 20 grand. And I was just kind of like, what? Like, Eddie Hearn wears a wristwatch that costs more than 20 grand. That's all you think I'm worth? That's all I bring to the table? And then I was again offered in June to fight. They asked me, would I fight Tasha Jonas? Yeah, real exciting. I put on some weight. 130 is a good weight for me. And they offered me $20,000. And I just thought, that how insulting is that? When 50% of your purse winds up going to the team, the management, your coaches, the gym, all of the time that you sacrifice for training. Like, what would I walk away with? A couple months? And that's insulting. So, the argument that everyone likes to have is, well, $20,000 is a lot more than we were making 10 years ago. Well, guess what? You were severely underpaid 10 years ago, and I'm severely underpaid today. And there's argument, well, nobody wants to see you box. Okay, then why do you keep asking? Right? Why do you keep asking?
that
why
is
does
true.
anyone care? If nobody wants to see me fight, why does everyone care what I have to say? And that can be made an argument too. Why does everyone give a shit what I have to say? There's a reason.
And actually, I didn't realise until recently with the whole pay, how much of it does, like you said, go on everything else, on your coaches, your travelling, your expenses, and then you end up walking away with hardly anything.
And when you factor in on top of all of that, the time that's sacrificed, like 4 hours a day has to go into training, which means those aren't earning hours anymore. So I'm working half days just so I can prepare for fights. You got to balance everything out. Like, if I proved anything in this sport, is that I will fight anyone. I'm not afraid. I don't care even what sport it is. I'll go to another sport. I don't care. But I'm just at that age, at that mindset, in that realm of boxing where I'm so familiar with the shady stuff that goes on behind closed doors that I just am fine if no one ever pays me to fight again.
I can see both sides of the argument, in that people say that you need to have the fans come in and watch to build up the money for it, but then equally you need to be seen.
Let me explain something to you. That case can be made for men's boxing too. Okay, that case can be made for men's boxing too. Male fighters are brought up on there's a blueprint that this is what we do. We get them 10 fights. Then we put them as a very small main card on a show and get them locally known. Then when there's buzz starts coming around, we put them as the opener for a big main card and let everybody see how great that was. And then after that, the next step is they're going to be the co-main event on a huge card, and then eventually the main card. I know this because I boxed about 10, 11 shows at the Barclays Center, maybe 10 shows. And there's like an order of how you go at the press conference. I always sat at the end, because it was like, hey, we're letting a girl on. And I loved it because I got a microphone, I got to speak, I had a chance. But over the years, I got to see that we would be me and then leading up to the main event. And the guy who sat next to me would eventually move to the front of the line and be replaced with other men who eventually moved to the front of the line. But my seat never changed. Through international titles, through ticket sales, through everything I did. I used to get my own press, local media, the news would come to the gym. I'm not even kidding, this can be verified. And my seat didn't change. And that's what's the problem with women's boxing. Don't tell me that we don't have fans when you're not putting us in front of those fans. And we know you know how to do that, because there's only one way people are gonna love Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence, Anthony Joshua, is if the promoters who are there to promote them put them in front of people and show them how good their boxing is. We are not. Katie Taylor won and unified her weight class on the undercard of an event. On the undercard. Everybody knows, if you're not last, co-main, or the entry, it doesn't matter. So I don't see the argument for the other side. There's no argument. It's just wrong. And it's time we stop using that excuse that there are no fans or that nobody wants to see women fight, because people just want to see fights. Show them a good fight. And what you're doing is you have world title holders opening cards. I've boxed at the Barclays Center defending a belt. $30,000 worth of tickets, fans standing outside locked doors before they open the doors. So that's very unequal what goes on behind closed door, behind the scenes in boxing.
So your last fight against Amanda Serrano, that was a pretty huge fight.
Sure was.
And you know, the amount of fans you must have brought in from that.
Yeah, I mean, they were like all fans from before, because again, like it was, sure, we co-headlined at MSG on, you know, a card that was, you know, Danny Jacobs. It wasn't a world title fight. I hate to use the term tune-up, and I'm sure I'll get a ton of shit for this, but when you call a spade, it's what it was. He was doing a small venue to have a tune-up fight before his big fight against Triple G, and me and Amanda were used to sell the venue, and that's exactly what we did. We sold the venue.
And it went down a storm, didn't it, that fight? Even though it was your only loss, you actually came away with, I think, so much respect and a lot more fans, probably, because of how tough you were.
Yeah.
So how was that whole experience, that fight for you?
It was tough, right? Like you guys watched it. I mean, I've still yet to rewatch it. I'm not a fight watcher, so I can only kind of relive the moments as I had them. And sure, it sucks. It's never fun to lose, but you can lose two ways. You can win and it feels like a loss, or you can lose and it feels like a win. And coming back after that first round, man, there was some sense of victory when I look back.
And which is again proved it, because you went across to MMA, again talking about money. MMA, they obviously pay a lot more for the female fights, and you've had some tough fights in MMA.
Yeah, everyone was tough.
Having your nose broken, didn't you?
Yeah, that was not fun.
And I think I've asked you before, actually, when I did a Q&A with you, about what one of your favourite moments. And didn't you say it was actually in one of your MMA fights when everyone was just calling for you?
Yeah, it was my pro debut for MMA. I fought at the Big Garden. See, there's the theater at the Garden, which is small, which is where most of my boxing fights took place. And then the Big Garden, where Billy Joel plays his piano. And I had that where I was kind of on my knees. It's something you dream of as a New Yorker, to be at Madison Square Garden and hear everybody cheer your name. So that's one that's definitely up there.
Who, because obviously you've never been stopped in your pro boxing career, who would you say is your toughest fight's been?
They've all been tough in their own way. I don't like to answer that question, because to say one fight is tougher than the rest is to imply that I didn't give my all in all of them. They were all challenging in their own way. I kind of used professional boxing as a learn on the go, you know, like I didn't have a plan. It was just like, I'm going to fight. I almost feel like I'm actually just a women's rights activist who used boxing as my channel, my platform.
Well, you've certainly given everyone a voice.
Yeah.
In terms of future plans, because obviously you briefly touched on it and some of the fights you've been offered this year, what kind of goals have you got for yourself in terms of boxing?
Well, I'm not closing any doors yet, but I do think mid-pandemic, it's really unrealistic to future plan. Like, I think I'm just trying to get it to where my daughter can go back to school, you know, we can get back on a regular routine. Everything is so messed up right now. To put myself on a plan is almost unreasonable, but nobody knows how to bounce back as good as me. So I'll figure it out.
And so do you think you want a piece of the super featherweight?
You know, I wouldn't mind it. I certainly wouldn't mind it if it was offered to me. It's like I said, I could never get down to 126 again, like barring amputation, it just wouldn't happen. I'm definitely a 130 or a 135 fighter. I would even push to maybe 140. You know, like I probably should have had my entire career at 130 and now becoming a 35 fighter. So, I'm also not in fight shape because without the promise of a paycheck, I'm finding myself having to work a lot more than train. So I would definitely need to get into a fight camp. But if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. Like, they offer me 20 grand for a fight. You know, people die doing what I do. People die in the ring, and friends of mine have died doing what I do. So I just don't take, at this point, at this age, at this stage of my career, that it really has to be valuable and make sense for me to go out and put my body and my life on the line. I've had 61 stitches in my face, multiple concussions. I boxed my last fight with Amanda Serrano completely out on my feet for 5 rounds, completely unconscious for 5 rounds. The girl walked by with the 6, and I remember going, did she make a mistake? I was like, it's only the second round, isn't it? And everyone was screaming, and I was just like, oh, that happened, you know? Like, my safety comes first. I want to remember my grandkids' names.
Yeah.
You got to pay me.
And obviously touching on that about the whole pandemic, how have you found coping with it all? Because obviously your pay is coming in from you know, training other people, coaching, and obviously that all got put aside. So how have you managed to get through it all?
Well, you just, like I said, I'm not putting any expectations on myself, no expectations on productivity. It's like, if I can get my bills paid and my kids' mental health is okay, I mean, I have less time to think about myself because I have a 16-year-old who's now having to do 11th grade in her bedroom, was very limited access to her friends, and her well-being and her mental health and her happiness is way more important than mine right now. So I'm just focused on keeping the lights on, keeping the bills paid, try to make it one less stress for her. And, you know, when this is all said and done, we'll hopefully have a good laugh.
Well, going back to sort of the boxing as to what you know has inspired you through your career, has there been any boxers that have inspired you or you've looked up to over your career?
Well, I've really had the great fortune of training at Geason's, where some of the best female fighters have fought, you know. So the generation before me, Melissa Hernandez, Alicia Ashley, Belinda Laracuente, they were some of the best unrecognized talent, the best girls who didn't get to go to the Olympics. I mean, Alicia Ashley talks about being in the class in 1997 of the first females that were even allowed to go to nationals and compete internationally, in the first Golden Gloves in New York City in the late 90s. I mean, women's boxing is still pretty much in its infancy, but, you know, to assume that those girls weren't great just because they weren't decorated certainly doesn't mean that. So to have been able to be in the ring with them, to get beat up by them, to steal some of their swag and what they do in the ring, I mean, that's invaluable, priceless.
I've just done an interview actually with Melissa Hernandez, and
Yeah,
it's been great just to talk over her career and everything she's
done. she's quite a character. She's been one of my like real inspos for my whole career. She's been there with me on the come up.
And I wanted to obviously talk about briefly what happened to you last week, because I know you put up on social media that you had a bit of a bad experience with a guy.
Sure. I think so the post that you're referring to is I talked about, kind of headed it off like what it's like being a woman, and part of being a woman that women don't even talk about because we've grown so used to this kind of thing that I thought that my platform was a good place to air it. And the basis of the story is every morning, basically the same time, I go out and I get a cup of coffee and I go out my back door and I open my back door, and all summer I noticed one guy just kind of stand there. And now I live across from a construction site, so I just associated with construction. But as women subconsciously do, I made a note. And every day I go home and walk and make sure he stayed on his side of the street, that he wasn't by my door. And I would notice it, but not think too much of it. Like I had about a little over 2 years ago, I had a lot of trouble with a stalker that I had put in jail that used to sit in front of my apartment, and they got rid of the stalking laws in New York City. So basically, if someone doesn't physically hurt you and you don't have actual proof that they did the damage, then there's nothing the police can do. So it was really, really stressful, hard having a kid. So long story short, this guy like kind of blocked my doorway, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. He had no mask on. You know, he's, oh, hey, my name is so-and-so, what's your name? And just like out of fear, politeness, whatever you want to call it, I gave him my name. I'm like, oh, I'm late, you know, try to walk around him, and he kind of inched in front of me to talk to me again. And what's so alarming was the amount of male responses and even some female responses, like, oh, he was just trying to talk to you. He just wanted to date. He was probably nervous, like romanticizing the fact that a man was physically blocking my way, almost forcing me to talk to him at 6 a.m. while making a point to tell me, hey, I see you here every single day. It's creepy. It's not okay. Like, it's not okay. It's not okay when a woman says, I don't want to talk to you, that she has to feel like she has to. And so many times, I mean, think back on your own life. How many times have you had to tell a friend, like, come in with me, there's this creepy guy in there? Or, you know, tell one of your guy friends, sit next to me, I don't want any guy to sit down. Like, it's not okay. And it's maybe time we start addressing that elephant in the room, that women everywhere they go have to face this.
No, you're right. You're right. That's definitely a conversation to be had. And yeah, well done for putting it out there and putting your story out there so that other people can speak to you about it. In terms of outside of boxing, have you got any other passions other than boxing? Any sort of things you enjoy?
This is always such an embarrassing part of my interviews, because like I'm like, I like to eat and drink wine. Boxing is such a physically demanding activity that when I'm on my downtime, I kind of just like to be irresponsible and act like I act like a teenager. I basically act like a teenager. My friends come over, we karaoke, we sing, we drink, we cook, you know. I just like to not be active.
And I think I've seen some posters of you roller skating and having fun.
Yeah. I mean, but that's more because I don't drive and it's hard to get around New York City. So that was like a real good way. I bike ride and things like that. I mean, I'm not saying I'm lazy. I don't have something where I'm like, oh, I want to do this as much as I love fighting.
And if there's any advice you would give your younger self, things that you know now that you would tell yourself way back, what would it be?
Stick up for yourself. Be nice to Heather. Forgive Heather for the bad choices she's made, because they're not going to define you.
Nice. Good advice. Yeah. Well, it's been really good to talk to you, Heather.
Lovely to see you as well, Susie.
And it's been some nice discussion about some hot topics at the moment.
Yeah, I'll be sure to share the article when it's out.
Brilliant, thank you. And I really hope with COVID comes to an end next year, and that the fight scene can get back on properly, and that you can get the money and get the fights.
Yeah. Thanks so much for covering that topic.
Thanks, Heather.
All right, girls. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please click like now and subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter and on Instagram. Thank you. Bye.